November Shah-Sage, Tenjobak-Shah, Murmansk, Soviet Union. The northern wind screamed like a living thing, tearing across the Barents Sea as snow whipped sideways over the harbour. The convoy had arrived, one of the many Arctic lifelines that kept Stalin's armies alive. Rusted cranes groaned against the cold as sailors in oil-stained coats hauled open the holds of American freighters. Inside, stacked in rows like sleeping giants, were hundreds of olive-green trucks brand new, their chrome glinting faintly beneath the grey light. Sergeant Ivan Petrov of the Shasith Guards Rifle Division watched from the pier, arms crossed, cigarette trembling between his fingers. He'd heard of American machines before, the way they bragged about their factories, their cars, their soft lives. But what he saw made him laugh. "Trucks," he muttered, flicking ash into the snow. "They think we fight wars with toys." Beside him, Corporal Mikhail Sorokin grinned, teeth yellow from months on the front. "Maybe they think we're taxi drivers, not soldiers." A nearby interpreter, wearing an American-issue parka, overheard them and smirked. "Detroit Steel, comrades," he said. "They'll surprise you." The soldiers just laughed harder. The Studebakers, the Americans called them US6, looked too delicate for war. Their rounded fenders and wide windshields seemed like something out of a parade, not a battlefield. The Red Army men, hardened by the endless mud and blood of the Eastern Front, saw luxury where they expected grit. When the first truck was lowered onto the dock, Ivan ran his hand along its side. The paint was smooth, unblemished, like it had never seen dirt. He climbed into the driver's seat, sinking into a cushion that felt absurdly soft compared to the wooden boards of Soviet models. The dashboard was clean, almost elegant. "Where's the crank?" he asked sarcastically. "No crank," replied the American liaison, smiling faintly. "Just ignition." Ivan turned the key, expecting nothing. The engine coughed once, then roared to life, deep and steady. For a moment, he sat frozen, the vibration humming through the steering wheel into his fingertips. Sorokin whistled low. It started without prayer or profanity. Ivan tried not to show it. But something in his chest shifted, the first flicker of curiosity replacing mockery. For the next 2 weeks, they tested the trucks in the brutal northern cold. The mercury dipped to -6, engines froze, and steel cracked like glass, but not these. The Studebakers started each morning without protest. Their heaters worked. Their tires gripped ice like claws. By the end of the month, the laughter in the camp had gone quiet. When orders came to move supplies toward the front, every driver wanted one of the new toy trucks. The war was about to learn what Detroit Steel and Soviet resolve could do together. January Tenjobak-Shah, Lake Ladoga, Soviet Union. The world was frozen solid. The sky, the lake, the trees. Everything trapped in a white silence so complete that the only sound was the low growl of engines. The Red Army called it Doroga Jizny, the road of life. It stretched across the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga, a lifeline into the starving city of Leningrad, where nearly 2 million civilians were trapped behind German lines. Every night, convoys crawled across the ice, bringing flour, ammunition, and the faintest spark of hope. For Sergeant Ivan Petrov, the laughter from Murmansk felt a lifetime away. He sat behind the wheel of a Studebaker, gloved hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. The cab rattled as the truck rolled over cracks in the ice. Behind him, a convoy of 15 more Studebakers followed in single file, each spaced 30 meters apart. One wrong move, and the ice could swallow them whole. The temperature hovered around -40. Frost crusted the inside of the windshield. Ivan's breath turned to vapor, drifting like smoke. He kept his eyes on the compass mounted to the dash. There were no roads, no signs, only endless white. Beside him sat Private Sergei Kolesnikov, barely 18, shivering under layers of wool. He peered nervously through the frosted glass. "You think the ice will hold, Comrade Sergeant?" Ivan didn't answer at first. The ice creaked beneath them, a sound like bones snapping. Then the engine's rumble drowned it out. "It held yesterday," he said. "It will hold today." The convoy moved forward, headlights dimmed to slits. Each truck carried a ton of flour. the difference between life and death for thousands of people waiting beyond the siege lines. Halfway across the lake, the silence broke. A distant drone echoed from above Luftwaffe bombers. "Air attack," shouted Kolesnikov. Ivan slammed the accelerator. The Studebaker roared, tires skidding on the ice as the convoy scattered. Bombs began to fall, geysers of snow and ice exploding around them. One truck vanished into the lake in an instant, swallowed by black water and fire. Ivan's windshield cracked from the blast pressure, but he didn't slow. "Keep her moving," he yelled. "Don't stop." Through smoke and snow, the convoy kept rolling. The trucks were light, their engines balanced perfectly for traction. Where heavier Soviet models would have sunk, the Studebakers danced across the ice like ghosts. By dawn, the survivors reached the far shore. The men climbed down, their faces pale and hands trembling. The cargo food and medicine was intact. Civilians met them with tears in their eyes, kissing their gloves, pressing bread into their hands. Ivan leaned against his truck, staring back across the frozen expanse. He could still see the burning wrecks of the fallen convoy, black scars against the white horizon. "They laughed at these trucks once," he murmured. "Now, they're saving a city." The road of life ran every night that winter. Dozens of Studebakers thundered across the lake, engines howling through snow and darkness. They became more than machines. They were veins of steel feeding a starving heart. And when spring came, and the ice finally broke, the people of Leningrad were still alive. For Ivan Petrov, the lesson was burned into memory. These toy trucks had outlasted frost, fire, and fear itself. But their true power, their real purpose, was yet to come. July 4th, Chinjaba, Sishasan, south of Kursk, Soviet Union. The air shimmered with heat, the horizon quivering under a sun that turned every shell casing into a brand of fire. The Battle of Kursk had begun the largest armored clash in human history. Sergeant Ivan Petrov crouched beside his truck, wiping sweat and grit from his face as German Batshapamyo thundered in the distance. The ground trembled like an earthquake. Across the steppe, the Red Army's new T, Sanjasimyo, and KV. Imyo traded fire with Tiger tanks. Smoke boiled into the sky, blotting out the light. Behind that front line, another army was in motion, quieter, but no less vital. A river of Studebaker trucks rolled forward, carrying fuel, shells, spare treads, medics, food. Without them, the Soviet tanks on the front wouldn't last a day. Ivan's once pristine truck was now caked in mud, its olive paint buried under a crust of dust and soot. The once joking driver was now a captain in charge of a full motorized supply battalion. He walked the line of trucks, shouting over the noise of engines and artillery. "Keep intervals tight. You drop a drum, you pick it up or drink it for breakfast." The men grinned, exhausted, sunburned, but determined. Each truck was loaded to the brim, the smell of gasoline hanging thick in the air. Out on the ridgeline, Soviet artillery roared again. Katyusha launchers mounted on the backs of Studebakers nicknamed Stalin's organs let loose, a scream that tore through the sky. Dozens of rockets streaked into the distance, slamming into German positions and throwing plumes of fire hundreds of meters high. Ivan ducked instinctively, feeling the shockwave rumble through the ground. The Americans had sent trucks, the Soviets had turned them into weapons. A radio operator jogged up, headset crooked on his head. "Captain, division reports fuel shortage at the Guth Tank Corps. They need immediate resupply 30 kilometers forward." Ivan checked his map. The route cut straight through the no-man's land left by retreating German forces, mines, shell holes, and chaos. He looked at his men. None hesitated. "Mount up," he barked. "We drive before nightfall." The convoy rolled out, 30 Studebakers grinding across the torn earth. The sun dipped low, turning the sky the color of blood. In the distance, tracer fire stitched the darkness. Every few minutes, an explosion would light up the horizon, revealing the silhouettes of tanks, some burning, some advancing. One by one, the trucks bounced over craters and shattered trees. Ivan's headlights cut through dust as he drove, his eyes stinging from smoke. The road vanished completely. He followed the sound of distant tank engines like a hunter chasing prey. By midnight, they reached the forward repair line, tanks idling, crews half dead from exhaustion. Ivan's men leaped from their trucks, rolling fuel drums down ramps, passing ammunition by hand. The ground was slick with oil and blood. "Captain Petrov," shouted a tank commander, waving from a nearby T-Sanjasi. "You made it." "Barely," Ivan replied. "You've got enough to keep moving." The man nodded. "Enough to chase them back to Oral." As dawn broke, Ivan climbed onto his truck's hood and watched the tanks roll out again, each one fed by the fuel his convoy had delivered. The roar of their engines merged with the trucks behind them, a single, endless growl of mechanized willpower. He realized then that this was what war had become. No longer just bravery and rifles, it was logistics, horsepower, industry. And these American toys had given the Red Army exactly that, motion. Without them, victory would have been a dream stuck in the mud. As the sun rose over the battlefield, Ivan rubbed grime from his eyes and smiled faintly. "Let's go," he said quietly. "Berlin's waiting." He climbed back into the Studebaker, turned the key, and the engine faithful as ever started on the first try. March 10 Jobasishawu, East Prussia. The sky hung low and grey, filled with the smoke of cities that no longer existed. Every mile west was another mile closer to the heart of the Reich, and every mile was carried on 6 wheels. Captain Ivan Petrov sat behind the wheel of his Studebaker, its cabin rattling as the convoy crossed a bridge of frozen mud and broken steel. Behind him, a river of trucks stretched farther than the eye could see. Fuel, food, ammunition, medics, even mobile field kitchens, all pounding toward Berlin like a single, unstoppable heartbeat. The Red Army had become something new. Fast, coordinated, mechanized. Once, Soviet offensives had crawled forward on horse carts and human backs. Now, they moved at the speed of an engine, and most of those engines bore a white star on their sides. The air smelled of diesel and cordite. Snow melted into slush, splattering the sides of the trucks, as they thundered past destroyed panzer hulks and burned out villages. Children watched from doorways, eyes hollow. Crows circled overhead. The war was almost over, but the killing hadn't stopped. Ivan reached for the radio mic. "Convoy Alpha, maintain spacing," he ordered. "Mud ahead. Don't get stuck." A younger driver's voice crackled through the static. "Captain, how far to the Oder?" 20 kilometers, Ivan replied. "And 1 lifetime." The men laughed, softly weary laughter, the kind that came only from those who had outlived too many friends. They rolled on, headlights piercing the mist. The Studebakers coughed smoke but refused to die. The soldiers joked that even if the world froze again, these trucks would keep running their hearts, powered by American gasoline and Soviet stubbornness. By nightfall, they reached the east bank of the Oder River. Across the water, the faint thunder of German artillery rumbled like distant storms. Engineers worked under floodlights, throwing pontoon bridges together as shells screamed overhead. "Captain," shouted a lieutenant. "Orders from HQ, we're to cross before dawn." Ivan nodded. "Get every truck fueled and ready. If one stops, push it into the river and keep going." That night no one slept. Mechanics checked spark plugs by candlelight. Men drank coffee boiled from river water. The engines idled quietly, like beasts waiting for release. At Lindslingling hours, the first trucks moved out. The pontoon bridge groaned under their weight as hundreds of Studebakers rolled into the mist, tires splashing through the rising current. Machine gun fire echoed from the opposite bank. Some trucks took hits and slid sideways into the black water, sinking fast, but the line never stopped. For every one lost, 2 more pressed forward. By sunrise, the bridgehead was secure. Soviet tanks rumbled across, followed by thousands of infantrymen riding in the backs of the trucks. Berlin was just days away. Ivan stood beside his Studebaker, watching columns of soldiers pour west. The morning sun glinted off the hood ornament, a small chrome S half buried in grime. He wiped it clean with his glove and smiled. "Not bad for a toy," he whispered. 2 months later, on May RND, Senju Basishawu, the red banner flew over the Reichstag. Berlin had fallen. When the dust settled, Ivan's convoy rolled into the ruined city past burned tanks, shattered glass, and walls carved with the names of the dead. Civilians peered from basements as the trucks rumbled through, carrying food instead of shells. For the first time in years, the engines of war were delivering life. Ivan parked his truck near the Brandenburg Gate, its tires sinking into the rubble. He climbed down, brushed a layer of ash from the fender, and just stood there, listening to the steady ticking of the cooling engine. All around him, silence spread, the kind of silence only found after the end of something too big to understand. He thought back to that frozen dock in Murmansk, to the laughter, the disbelief, the cold wind biting through his coat. Now, the same machine that had been mocked for being too smooth, too soft, too foreign, had crossed half the world and carried them to victory. The Studebaker wasn't a toy. It was the backbone of an army. The bridge between two worlds that never trusted each other but together had saved millions. As Ivan turned the ignition one last time, the engine purred obediently to life. The sound rolled down the ruined boulevard like a promise that, even after everything, life would keep moving forward. He let the motor idle a moment, then smiled faintly and said, "Good girl." The camera fades as he drives off through the smoke, a single man, a single truck, rolling into history.